welcome everybody to talk this evening, and welcome to the future audience who may watch this on YouTube in their office or wherever else. So the kind of context to tonight's talk is that the Burren Programme, as Pranjali said, ended late last year, and our final report was submitted to our funders in the Department of Ag late March. So it's a timely chance to, I guess, highlight the sort of the learnings from the project, review the impact in the Burren and the lessons learned. So tonight I'm going to spend maybe 40 minutes talking you through the programme, and there'll be an opportunity for questions afterwards. And if there's follow-on queries, I'll leave my email at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll kick off slideshow from beginning. Pranjali, you can tell me if we're looking good there.
Yes, all good, yeah.
Okay, so the Burren Programme. So looking back and looking forward is the title of the talk. So I'm just opening my screen here. Right, so this is a nice image, courtesy of my colleague Donald Hogan, of our cattle drove last year, and it, to me, captures the essence of what's wonderful about the Burren, the landscape, the biodiversity, you know, the cultural history, the farming, the whole story. And I suppose the Burren Programme has been an effort over the last number of years to sustain that wonderful balance between the farmers of the Burren and their unique landscape, so that all of us can get to enjoy it into the future. So tonight's talk is going to be, now if my slide will move for me, yeah, 3 sections really. First of all, impact. Like, did the Burren do what it hoped to do? Did it meet its objectives? Secondly, what is different about this? Because we've got a lot of attention over the years, but why? What approach did we take that was so different and so interesting? And thirdly, what lessons can we draw from the Burren Programme, maybe for use elsewhere? So to begin, just to go down again, my slide isn't working very well. Yeah, to begin with, I suppose you could describe the Burren Programme as a long journey with lots of little steps on the way. It hasn't been a straight road. There's been plenty of twists and turns along the way, and it's been really, its origins were back in 1995 at a kind of a troubled time, where SAC designations had come into play and the new REP scheme had been announced. And there was issues, I suppose, particularly for the Burren as a unique landscape with unique traditions at the time. And fair play to one man, Michael Dabron. He took it upon himself to challenge the authorities in that regard and to work out a better deal for the Burren and for its farmers. And I think, I'm not going to talk about the nature restoration law tonight, but like the situation was a little bit similar back then. There was a lot of anger and angst about these designations coming from on high. But what was different back then is we had amazing leadership in the Burren, and that's probably what we're lacking to some degree today, because Michael saw opportunities where others saw challenges. And I'm delighted to say Michael is still with us, campaigning and supporting in every possible way the programme and anything that's good for the Burren, including the trust. Michael is supporting. So it went from that in 1995 to a research project in 1998, and that was myself involved in that as a student, as a mature student. Spent 3 or 4 years here and kind of went native in the landscape, as I say, kind of got stuck in really. And that research led, I suppose, to a life-funded project called Burren Life, which ran for 5 years. And that brought us another amazing person, I think, along with Michael, who was Sharon Parr, who became the programme scientist and who just contributed an extraordinary amount and still does to the Burren and to the programme. And then we went on in 2010 to get government funding to roll this programme out across the region through the Burren Primary for Conservation Programme. And again, our funders there were the Department of Ag and National Parks. Then in 2016, with the new CAP, we got officially what's called the Burren Programme for 6 years, 7 years actually, and we finished off in 2022 and have been succeeded now by the Acres project. So that's a little window into the journey, the length of the journey. But tonight I'm just going to focus on the period from 2010 to 2022, 13 years inclusive, because that's really when we were, I suppose, a fully blown local agri-environmental scheme with a very unique nature to it, as I'll explain later on. So as well as being a long journey with lots of steps, I have to acknowledge the fact that this journey has involved a huge amount of people, primarily the farmers of the Burren, the farm families of the Burren, I should say, farm advisors, funders like the Department of Ag, who have funded us since 2010, national parks who have been stalwarts since back 2005 with EU life funding, the programme team in Karen, and I really should acknowledge the tremendous work that they've done over the years and continue to do in the office in Karen. And finally, the Burrenbeo Trust, the volunteers and the staff of the trust, without which the Burren Programme really wouldn't have achieved half of what it did. So there's a lot of people to thank and acknowledge, which as part of this long journey. So to begin the sort of, I suppose, to talk, just to review what we set out to achieve with the Burren Programme. And really it was about sustaining the agricultural management of high nature value farmland in the Burren, so looking after the biodiversity through farming. Secondly, to look after the amazing cultural heritage that we have here and the landscape, the unique landscape we have in the Burren. And thirdly, to improve water quality and usage efficiency in the Burren, because water is a precious resource. Right now, it's incredibly precious because there's a real bad drought on. So it's looking after the water sources, make sure they're clean and they're well looked after. And I suppose the extent of the programme then would have, as its maximum, reached 328 farms, about 23,000 hectares. That's about 56,000 acres in old money. And really, if you want to picture it, it's about 70% of kind of the core Burren, I suppose, the SSC areas of the Burren. So about close to 3/4 of the Burren. So it was a substantial programme in terms of its extent and its duration. I mean, 13 years is quite a long time in the agri-environmental world. The basic methodology, before I outline the impact, I just want you to understand how we captured impact. So we paid farmers, the Department of Agriculture paid farmers via the local office, I suppose, for two things. First of all, was a payment annually for the condition of their land. So the better the condition, the more money the farmer got, depending on the area, of course. More area meant more payment also. And that was really driven by management. So past management, if your land was in good condition, you got high scores and higher payments. But if currently you managed it as well as you could, that was also acknowledged in the score and in the payment. But that then was complemented by a fund for conservation action. So if your scores were low, you needed to fix the water supply or remove some invasives, then there was a fund available for farmers to dip into to address those problems. And that then in turn would drive on the score to improve the score. That was the whole theory of it. So payment for results and then payment for a fund for support actions to improve those results. So very simple, what we call a hybrid payment model, but very, very new, I suppose, in the agri-environmental world. And to put it in pictures, because I always like to explain things as simply as I can. So here's three common enough scenarios actually in the Burren. The top one, you got way too many cattle for the bit of land that they're on. So they're getting fed, so there's nutrients being imported. There's a lot of point source pollution, soil damage. And because the cattle are eating out of one point all the time, there's no grazing, little grazing the rest of it. So you have scrub encroachment. So it's pretty grim, a scenario like that. And that was quite common even during the period of reps in the Burren. Just below that, then you have a kind of an area which isn't really being grazed at all. And that's more and more common, or is being very lightly grazed. It's more and more common, basically because it's quite inefficient to do so. So it's free forage, but it takes a lot of time to herd cattle on those hills. And thirdly, then you have kind of a traditionally stocked winterage with a nice number of cattle on it, and things are being kept in good order. So these three, using a very simple assessment system, can be given a score of 10. So top one is rubbish from the environmental point of view. The middle one isn't great. There's very little work being put in. So we'll give it a 4, as Sam say. And the bottom one then is really good. So 9 or 10 out of 10. And of course, that then translates into a payment. So low scores don't get any payment, but if you're delivering for biodiversity and water quality and landscape as per the score, then you get paid a premium rate. Of course, if you want to move down to the premium rate, you might have to do a bit of work like change your feeding system or supply some water so the cattle can graze, repair walls, put grazers back in, herd the cattle right through the winter. And that then can bring you from those negative scenarios to positive ones. So that's the whole simple sort of structure that we adopt. We assess the condition of the land, and then we provide support to improve that condition and improve the payment arising. So it's very simple, but as I said, quite innovative at the time when we began. Just final slide on the assessments. It's a very simple, user-friendly assessment. We felt early on that we didn't want to go down the species route because it wouldn't make much sense in the context of a big 25-acre burn wintridge where every step you take is different, but also because we want to make the scoring system accessible to the farmer. So the criteria that we use were the grazing level, the level of dead plant material or litter, the damage from the feed site, was there a lot of bare soil or erosion, was the water source damaged, was there much invasive scrub, not woodland or established scrub, but invasive scrub into the grasslands, was there a lot of bracken, purple moor grass, other weeds, and how was the integrity, did it look like it should? And like the reason I include this slide here is that scoring system, which is assessed using a simple scorecard, really does capture how good a field is. You can sense it as you walk into the field. This field is in good condition, and this is just a way of capturing it. And to Sharon's great credit, she managed to develop this really wonderfully sophisticated but simple scoring system in the space of a couple of months, I think it was, back in 2010. My only role in it was to tell Sharon that she had to do it, so I'm taking some credit. But the scoring system had 10 criteria weighted, depending, like grazing is a big driver of biodiversity in the burn, so that had a high weighting. It reflected past and current management, so that's really good. If you managed your land well in the past, you're rewarded straight up. It also captured the kind of the site prospects and its condition. So if it's under threat or if the trend is negative, it'll capture that. Very farmer friendly. And the beautiful thing about it is that it underpinned the payments to the farmers, but it also automatically allowed us a system of monitoring the program and the impact at ground level. So here you can see some of the results. Now I said to somebody a few weeks ago to talk that if I was getting myself a t-shirt, and I have a nice Farming for Nature t-shirt on tonight, but if I was getting myself a t-shirt, I'd put this graph on it, because this to us is pretty amazing. It's a very simple graph. To the left you can see this, the scores from 0 to 10. I've just honed in here on the sort of 6 to 8. And across the bottom line then you can see time, so going from 2010 to 2022. Now this is a subset of farms, about 100 farms, and we tracked the scores on the fields within those farms over time, and we aggregated them and averaged them out. So on average, when farmers first came into the program in 2018, their scores averaged about 6.8 out of 10. So they were good, but they weren't in great condition. And they started to climb because farmers grazed better, they used the different feeding systems, stopped feeding silage in many cases, they started to repair walls, remove scrub, fix water. It went up and up and up over the duration of the first round of the Burren Programme, if you like, right up until 2015. Then things started to kind of, you can see there's a bit of a change there. What happened? Well, it was the end of one cap cycle and the beginning of another. So there was a loss of momentum. And that loss of momentum carried on a little bit into 2018 because as the new scheme then was starting to kick in, but there was IT issues. But then it kind of took off pretty much again from 2018 and started to rise under the Burren Programme. But it's a phenomenal graph because it does capture the fact that, you know, the Burren, this amazing landscape, the environmental health of this landscape, we can prove was actually enhanced year on year by virtue of being within the Burren Programme, the work and the improved payments. And those scores have a lot of integrity attaching to them, because every one of those scores across hundreds of fields was checked annually by a farm advisor and then double checked by one of our team, myself, or in the picture here, Neil or Cormac, or one of the lads, Donald possibly, or Sharon as well. And the farmer would have realised the score and the Department of Ag would have done inspections as well. So these scores carry a lot of integrity as well, and they do show the impact over time. You can look at it in a different way, maybe a simpler graph. And this graph shows you, and I have only 3 graphs in the things, don't get alarmed. This graph shows you the change in area per score over time. So if you look at the score of 10 there, within this sample, about 600 hectares of more of the burn was scoring 10 than at the start of the programme in 2010. About just over 600 hectares of the burn was scoring 9, and about 150 more hectares of the burn was scoring 8. So the higher scoring area of the burn was increasing. So more of the burn was in very good condition. Now, it was in very good condition at the expense of the poorer scoring stuff, the 7s, the 6s, the 5s, the 4s, the 3s. So that again shows you in very simple terms over time and over a large area what was happening. So what was actually happening was that areas which, where there's bits of damage from maybe water source pollution or poor grazing of maybe millennia grass or other issues, those fields problems are being sorted out and grazing was being restored and you're getting really good outcomes. We still had a persistent problem. We'll come back to it. The 0 went up. That's silage feeding. That reflects the persistence of a particular issue around silage feeding. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. But in general, you can see the trend towards improved scores and environmental health. The final slide is just to break down in more detail. So these are scores from 1,700 fields over the last, across about 23,000 hectares over the last 6 years. Now, there's 3 colors because there's 3 groups of farmers that came in at different times. So the first group came in 2016, the blues, and they showed a 6% improvement in score over time. Now, they started quite high. You see their scores coming in were 7.3. That's because most of them had already been in 6 years of the Burren Programme, so their scores had been lifted. Whereas the oranges, they just came in 2017, and they showed a huge improvement, 14% over time. And the greys then came in 2018, and again, they showed about a 10% improvement. So that's within the last cycle of the Burren Programme. All the tranches, all the farmers in general showed an improved outcome. Now, not every farmer improved individually, but the general trend was towards improved environmental outcomes. So that kind of shows you what was achieved on the results-based front, and that's the critical monitoring mechanism that we have to show it. Now, we can dig into those scores and see what was driving the change, the improvements, for instance. They were usually driven by better grazing, targeted scrub control, withdrawal of silage feeding, recovery from damage, protecting of water, reduction of bracken and weeds, and so on, and improved condition of the flora. So we could see over time what was driving the scores, actions and better grazing. And we can also see where scores are falling. What was the problem? It was that the grazing was falling back again. It wasn't up to the standard, or else there's too much grazing in summertime possibly. Silage feeding might have come back. Scrub was regrowing or expanding. There was damage to habitat. So scores at field and farm level could rise and fall, but we could analyze why and take action as a result. So if the scores are low, then the farmer had the opportunity to access a fund to address those problems. So if there's grazing, you might need to repair some walls and put in some water so you could target your grazing again. So we had a very simple farm plan where a farmer could, with his planner, decide, I want to do this job. I want to repair some wall. The advisor and ourselves would map it, check it out. The contractor of the farm would fix the wall and the farmer would immediately get paid then for that work. Now, it was a very user-friendly system. The farmer could apply for this funding anytime, choose to do some or none of the actions, declare what actions were done and get paid. So it was everything we did, we tried to do it with as much flexibility for the farmer as we had. And that goes down to the essence of the Burren Programme, is that we were all there to serve the farmer in order for the farmer to serve the needs of the Burren. And I think that's really important as well. The kind of work that we've done, I have a table here showing it, huge amount of work done over the last 6 years. There was about 730 work plans consisting of 7,500 individual tasks. Now, a task could be putting in a roadway into a remote site. It could be water storage. It could be removal of an area of scrub. It could be fixing a wall. Some of the tasks were enormously complex. They required weeks of liaison with the authorities to get the permissions in place. Some of them were quite simple, like putting a water tank in. But that's a huge amount of work that was carried out by farmers and local contractors using equipment sourced largely within local shops and co-ops. So very good for business. And just to capture it, these are some figures from the 13 years that the programs were running. And it's important to remember as well that these support conservation, but they also support the future of the farms, because to farm this land, you need good infrastructure, good access, ease of access, and so on. So, for instance, there was 42 kilometres of new access track put in, and Sharon would have been central to trying to find routes and mechanisms to make the least possible impact on the environment while offering farmers the ability to access their land now and in future. And to be honest with you, it was a humongous task, and not everybody got what they wanted, but we tried to compromise and give people as much as we could. That was a huge challenge. 62 kilometres of old track were upgraded, maybe using chip or filling in holes and stuff like that. 276 kilometres of pathways were cut through scrub. So these are 2 to 3 metre wide paths cut using chainsaw usually, so that animals could access areas of grazing which were being rendered inaccessible through scrub growth. So huge improvements in access for cattle, for farmers, for herding, and so on. In terms of the infrastructure, like 178,000 metres of wall repaired over the last 13 years. It's phenomenal. And this is not talking about wall which is in perfect condition and we're counting it. No, this is where we counted broken bits of wall, metre by metre, and those were repaired metre by metre by farmers. As part of that is about over 1,150 new gates were fitted, including the iconic, as we like to say, Burren Gate. You can see it here, a locally made gate. I think there's 4 people making these now, and these have become a bit of a flagship for the Burren Programme. These are a local design. They used to be made in a local forge here in the East Burren, but we loved the design and we thought they added a little bit of quality to what we were trying to do. And as a result, farmers took to them. We funded it at a higher rate. And again, it's spawned a little mini business for some operators to make these gates and to install them across the burn. Water is hugely important in the burn, keeping water clean and making sure that cattle have water when they need it in summer or in winter. So we would have invested a lot in solar and wind, about 800 new water troughs, which means 800 cleaner springs. So that would have been a big part of our job. And that, of course, helps grazing to happen on these areas then as well. And scrub removal, about 479 hectares of targeted scrub removal. And again, people might have questions about removing scrub, but when you put it all together, it's not a huge amount. There's some farms that are no bigger than that. And it was done in a very targeted way, targeting grasslands, which are the real rare resource here. So removing scrub from encroaching grasslands, or archaeology in some cases where permission was available. But if it was established scrub and had a woodland flora, we didn't allow farmers to remove it. So it was done in a targeted way and has, when done properly, can have a hugely beneficial effect for our grasslands and for our grazers as well.
Sorry, Brendan, I think you have muted yourself accidentally.
Okay, for
So
how
if you
long?
can go back a minute or two, please. Thank you.
Okay, so we were talking before about the investments. I think we covered that, Pranjali, did we?
Yeah.
You hear most of that. Okay.
Yes.
So just about the cost then. So between 2021 and 2010 and 2015, about 6 million public funding and farmers co-funded work amounting to additional 1.6. Then for the last 7 years under the Burren Programme, 8.3 million of public funding plus match funding from farmers, about 1.55. So that's a total value in terms of the work, the payments for the work and for the scores of about 14.25 million. Plus an additional 3.15 from farmers. So that's about 17 million into the local economy in terms of work, either in kind or in cash. The administration cost for this was about 20%. And when I say administration, I actually don't mean administration, I mean delivery costs. So that includes the costs of monitoring, farmer advice, training, admin, mapping, IT, all those different kind of things. So it's very much a bespoke approach, but the admin costs I felt was actually quite low compared to what was expected, coming in around 20%. For the farmer, the average payment for the scores was about 3,500. But if you had a large amount of land in very good condition, you could earn up to 10,000. But if you had a small amount of land in poor condition, you might be getting paid 80, 90 euros. So as a results-based scheme, the more land in a better condition, the more you got paid. Now the payments were aggressive. So a farmer with twice as much land didn't get twice as much money. He maybe got 1.5 times as much. So the payment system was good, but the average payment was about 3.5. Then for the works, the average work plan was worth about 3,500 euros. So that's on average. Some of them went up to 15, 17, 18,000 euro because there was a lot of work involved. But on average, that's what the farm planned. So the farmers might have been getting, those that are doing work annually, might have been getting about 7,000 euros from the program, which in the scheme of things isn't very much. Then when we look at the benefits, this is from an external evaluation. This input, this financial input generated 27 million euros in the local economy. It's generated about at least 39 million euros worth of landscape and biodiversity improvements, and supported on average 20 local jobs per annum. That's over and above the local team. And for the taxpayer, it generated extremely good value for money because we weren't paying farmers who didn't deliver, and all the works were co-funded. So there was a very good return on investment, I think it's safe to say. Some of that data came from an external evaluation. So it's not just me saying it, this is an external evaluation commissioned by the Department of Ag, which showed the social, economic and environmental impacts of the programme, which were really significant. And they were able to calculate the value of the improvements and the return on investment. So I just wanted to show that because there's a notion of overcompensating farmers, you know, because they're in the burn and aren't they great? No, we're paying farmers to deliver essential services, really. And by doing so, we're getting a great deal as taxpayers. I should say as well that the programme is quite unique and the approach is quite unique. And the Burren is the only place in Ireland to be awarded the European Diploma for Protected Areas. And this is a sort of an accreditation by the Council of Europe, which normally goes to state-owned land. But the Burren uniquely, it's privately owned largely, but was afforded this designation or this accreditation because of the work of the Burren Programme. So it's acknowledged, I suppose, both by the economists and by conservationists that this is a really good model. Now, what does it look like on the ground? This investment and this work, and I've borrowed a picture from Oliver Nagel here, and this is Oliver's wonderful family, because we're not just dealing with the farmers, we're dealing with the families, and Oliver's dad, Pat, is featured in the picture later on as well. But if you take a look at the beautiful image of Oliver's farm there, what the Burren Programme has kind of done is, you know, it's helped him manage the land in a certain way. So he's actually increased his stocking levels, I think, by about 20%. He's put in multiple Burren gates, all made by Pádraig Howley in Kilfenora, so generating local business. He's employed contractors to help remove the scrub, a local family, and some helpers who've been paid to do that, and some of the wall work as well. He's repaired a lot of his water facilities, buying local materials and using local tradesmen to do that and to fix up a shed to capture more water. He's moved to a different feeding system using a Burren ration, which is sourced from local mills. He's effectively employing a local team in Carron, myself and my colleagues, and a wonderful archaeologist, Elaine Lynch, and Michael, her father, to advise. So our jobs are ultimately dependent on people like Pat and Oliver doing their work. And now it's being used as well for educational tours and study tours, and usually in a voluntary capacity, but because the Nagels are generous people, but there's added value being generated there as well. So it's amazing what can happen at farm level with the right stimulation and support. And every field on Oliver's farm scores 10 out of 10. So best of all, the environment is in mint condition. A lot of the walls have been restored. The history is popping back out again. So it shows what can be done. I don't want it to sound like everything's hunky-dory. We do have regrets and there are shortcomings. Just to mention a few of them, we did hope for more farmers. 450 was our target. We had 328 at tops, so that covered 70% of the area. The other 30%, for most of them, it wasn't worth their while coming in because they're already in GLOS, which is the National Agri-Environmental Scheme. But hopefully that will be addressed in future. We'll have a higher uptake. Impact-wise, it's a regret that every year some farmers, their score fell. Now, it's understandable, but it's still regrettable that this does happen. But, you know, it could be climate, weather, disease. It could be, you know, not being in the position to do the work. So things do change. So it's understandable, but regrettable. We had hoped maybe for a bigger drive on score improvements. So 1 to 2% per annum. Of an improvement. Doesn't sound like a lot, but actually in retrospect, it's not the jump, it's if you can hold it. So the scores, the increases we held, we banked them as we went along. So it actually amounted to a very significant change over time. Not all farmers wanted to do work. So 30% of our farmers undertook no work whatsoever, didn't avail of any of the conservation work, even though they probably had work to be done. And that's a reflection of the fact that, you know, it's full employment now. Most of our farmers work off farm. It's not a nice type of work to be cutting scrub or repairing walls in bad weather, and it's not that lucrative. So that's an issue for the future, I think, availability of labour to carry out the work. Usually the work was done when we checked that it was done, but the standard was often disappointing, and that's something which is always a regret. If one guy does a great job and is getting paid the same as a guy who does a poor job, that's not great. Sometimes we develop farm plans and they were never carried out. And that's a cost to put those plans together, cost to the advisor and to ourselves. So it's a pity when it's not done. That's a regret. Follow up on works. I mean, you can cut scrub, but you need to go back and cut it again if you want to keep it out. Likewise with water, you need to look after your water troughs and make sure they're stable and they're kept well. And in land where there's lots of goats and other damage, to maintain the walls. And that hasn't always been the case. That's understandable, but regrettable as well. Advisors, we had a great team of advisors in the program, farm advisors, but you know, often they had such a workload, and I think they're so underappreciated that they couldn't deliver quite as much as we'd hoped or needed. Damage, we had a remarkably high level of compliance under the Burren Programme. Occasionally, literally you could count them on one hand, damage was done, usually small scale, but under the Burren Programme, at least we can reassure the taxpayer and the funder that if damage was done, we immediately took action in terms of reducing scores or not paying for damaging work. So at least there was consequences. Of greater concern is the fact that outwith of the Burren Programme in the SAC areas, there's lots of ongoing damage taking place to the limestone pavement and habitats of the Burren, which is a huge, heartbreaking regret at this day and age. Admin-wise, for me, it's a regret that more and more I had to spend time behind the desk as opposed to out in the field talking to farmers, because I think there was more admin. Like leader programs, I often think as you go along, the admin catches up with you. And stuff like getting permissions from farm works takes a long, long time. Another regret might be legacy, that we still have a big issue with the average age of our farmers would be in the mid to high 50s, and not, in many cases, clear succession or generation renewal. So who will do this work in future? And I suppose a regret, as I might mention later, is that the new acres programme probably won't deliver as much as we'd hoped and as we need. And I've mentioned that later as well. So that's the kind of the assessment of the Burren Programme. Now, just secondly, and I'll try and move through this fairly quickly, just to kind of capture what's different about the approach, because now we're 13 years later, but at the time, the Burren Programme was quite revolutionary in what it did. And just to go over it again, this notion of the payment structure was very new. People were very wondering, would this work at all? Would we have farmers complaining all the time about their scores not being high enough? Would the scores be all over the place? None of that has happened. Farmers have really bought into this. We invite farmers every year to come in and challenge their scores if they feel they're wrong, and maybe one or two every year, and they usually leave happy with the explanation that we give them. So it's worked really well. It's guaranteed value for money to the taxpayer. It gives the farmer a challenge or incentive, and farmers love that. So, you know, there's not a penalty, but there's a bonus. If you hit 9s and 10s, you get 25 or 50% of a bonus, and they love that challenge, and it drives improvement. It's very impactful. So rather than just paying for what's there and leaving it, the payment structure incentivized improvement all the time. So your lowest scoring field was costing you money, costing you the highest payment. So you had an incentive to address whatever it might be, their water or scrub or whatever might be wrong with that field. So it's pushing farmers and improvements on all the time. And the beautiful thing about the results-based system is that it embraces complexity. We want our countryside to be complex, people doing things in different ways at different times. So it enables more freedom to farm, innovation, and generates a greater diversity of outcomes, which is really important for nature. So different people doing different things at different times. And also it creates an appetite among farmers. So if you pay more for 9 or 10, farmers want that more money and they want to know how to get it. So they want the advice, they want the innovations. Rather than forcing this upon them, we're creating demand for that. And that's really important. And we did ask our farmers during training anonymously, do you think it's fair? 83% yes, said yes, because basically they were being paid for what they did. You do good work and you get paid. There's a good incentive to manage the burn. And it works it rewards efforts and improves the conditions of the land. So we're strong advocates to this day of result-based payments complemented by actions, payment for actions. It does work. There's a very interesting publication, Farm for Nature. It's online if you want it, capturing the burn story and those of other projects. Secondly, I think we were probably the first really local agri-environmental scheme in Ireland. Our office right there in the centre is between the school and the church. Couldn't be more central, right in the heart of the burn. An open door policy for farmers. And this probably was, for farmers, the most important thing about the programme is that if they had a problem with us or with the department who were paying them, they could come to us. If they needed advice, they could come to us. We dealt with the paperwork, we dealt with the problems. As a local approach, we were able to do local research, for instance, into feeding systems and share that then through videos and through leaflets, so targeted advice to meet the needs of the area. Training then in the field as well, delivered locally within local buildings, community centres and out on site. And I think what was really innovative about us as well is when we started, an agri-environmental plan was like a telephone directory, thick, full of numbers and stuff, and it was unintelligible. So we scrapped everything and we brought the farm plan back down to the bare bones of a map, showing your fields with numbers, and then a simple one-page summary of your scores, a simple one-page summary of your work. And that was, I remember at the time, that was revolutionary. Now it's more commonplace, thankfully. Thirdly, I think we looked at the farmers as a resource and not a problem, and we built a model which can best be described as community stewardship. And this is what Burrenbeo are about as well. And this is where Burrenbeo's role came in hugely important. We created so many innovations with regard to this notion of stewardship and building community who are able and willing to look after their place. So we have tea talks, which are a lovely original idea where we bring people together, have a cup of tea and learn about the local area. We had the Burren Winters Festival, which celebrates farming in the Burren and beyond. We have farmer-led walks, so giving the farmers the power and giving them the leadership role amongst their community. We had awards, so we started rewarding farmers like the Nagels because their scores went up higher than anybody else's. And that worked so well that we've extended it nationally now to the Farming for Nature project, where we have ambassadors all over Ireland, including Oliver Nagel. We have schools programs which have run since 2002, I think, where local kids, farmer sons and daughters, become empowered to become the leaders in future conservation of the Burren. All these were very new, original ideas at the time and broadened, the environmental focus to include a social one as well. So those are all different. And I should also add that, I suppose, partnership, it's worth mentioning that as well. That sounds obvious, but I think we were one of the few projects where the IFA went, basically, as I say, went into bed with National Parks and Wildlife Service, the old enemy, Teagasc, Department of Ag in the EU. That was an unprecedented partnership at the time, and a very constructive one, because the IFA saw the opportunity, National Parks saw the opportunity, and the others came along to support that opportunity. So phenomenal partnerships, and they've grown over time. We've worked with the Heritage Council, National Monument Service, Burrenbeo, the EPA, private sector, local authorities, Forest Service, the wider community, businesses. Again, not just through the Burren Programme, but through the relationship that we have with the Burrenbeo Trust. And by the way, the Burrenbeo Trust have kind of reimagined what it means to be an environmental NGO in an area like this, and have been hugely constructive in their role of supporting it. So there's some of the original ideas. So just to wind down, I'm going to finish off. We're scaling now. So we started with 6 million over 6 years for 160 farmers. Then back in 2016, EIPs came along and extended this locally targeted, often result-based approach across the country to huge success, into 2,000 farmers. So hen harrier projects, pearl mussel projects, things like that, really tested the model. And that helped to inform, and we would have supported this, the introduction of acres. So 8 cooperation projects with a local office each, and a result-based sort of element to it. So the numbers have grown again to 20,000 now, and the budget has grown. So it really, at one level, it's great progress. And now we have the Acres Burren Arran project, which will be run by a team in Carron, and many of our former colleagues, and a team in the Aran Islands as well. And we'll also include South Galway, so 1,300 farmers. And there's some really positive elements, more farmers and more budget, local offices and teams. And I can't speak highly enough of the Burren team and the other Acres Arran team, Acres teams across the country, I think, who are going to be a huge resource. There's going to be apps for scoring, so we can do it much more efficiently. Greater efficiencies of scale. So the overhead for this program will be reduced by 2/3, probably to around 6% of costs. A bigger network of people and support. And it really does frame Ireland as a leader at European level in innovation when it comes to agri-environment and the use of result-based payments. However, there are concerns, particularly for the Burren, and I don't want to be negative, but the payment structures we feel are very flawed. They don't reward in the way that we would have liked the farmers that deliver most. We would regret also that there's not as much flexibility. Now, we were extremely fortunate to have a blank page when we started, and we realize there's limitations as part of a national scheme, but we would strongly argue for more flexibility for the local teams to manage their budgets and their programs to suit the area and the outcomes. We would also have concerns about advisor capacities. I think advisors are a massive resource, but we treat them so badly, and I think their workload is going to really pose a huge problem for the future Acres programme. But scaling is positive, but it can't be done at the expense of impact is our concern. But I do recognise there's positives as well. And I suppose looking forward, we're fully determined to help and continue to work with our colleagues, support the colleagues in Carron who have great admiration for it, to deliver as much as we can for the Burren and for the farmers and the environment under the New Acres programme. We will continue to advocate for improvements and more flexibility and better funding structures. We will be feeding into midterm reviews and helping to inform the next CAP based on the lessons learned here. We will be exploring how opportunities through the Climate Action Plan and Nature Restoration Law can sort of feed into the whole Acres programme and make it even more impactful. Looking forward, like looking at the role that we're going to play for the next few years, I suppose myself and maybe Sharon, who stood back from Acres, obviously for reasons explained earlier, we're going to, I suppose, continue to promote result-based payments because we believe they're the way forward. Promote farmers as resources, as first responders to these crises, because the Burren has shown that farmers are a resource. And also help other landscapes and communities. So, for instance, last week we had a group from Rathcroghan and County Roscommon visiting to hear our story and to try and figure out a way forward for themselves. And we're always open to welcoming groups like that of farmers and advisors and supporters to share our story with them. Looking ahead, adding value is something we'd like to look at. Looking at the private sector, I think we can't rely on CAP to do this anymore. We have to look for private sector investors, but the right ones to pay for results and actions. We have to look at better marketing of our produce so farmers can capture more value. We have to look at new innovations around tourism and education. We would like to continue, and we'll try to continue monitoring so that the existing data sets that I showed from 2010 can be sustained. We will be continuing to work with the Burrenbeo Trust. I certainly will, celebrating through the Burren Winter Festival and Burren in Bloom, supporting farm-led walks, informing and engaging through programs like Heritage Keepers, our tea talks, our monthly walks, working with the Harris Corner Project and the volunteers as well. So finally, I'm coming to the last couple of slides now, and I'm slightly over time. I suppose you could look at the Burren programme as a sort of an experiment, and we're testing a hypothesis that farmers are a resource in sustaining the Burren's environment and heritage. And I can safely say, in my experience and from the data I've presented tonight, that with the right support, that absolutely yes, even in a landscape as complex as the Burren, farmers can deliver these environmental outcomes to great effect. We can show that we've proven and sustained environmental improvements by working with farmers, excellent return on investment and strong social and economic benefits for the region. So I suppose extrapolating from that, like if this does work in a place like the Burren over such an extended period of time at good costs, well, like why can't it work elsewhere? And in particular, how can the 130,000 farm families right across Ireland become first responders to these environmental crises? Now, not that I'm putting it on them, but I'm saying there's opportunities here, and how can we help them to avail of these opportunities and deliver for an environment? So some lessons, payments. I think these hybrid payments are the way forward, like I said. Mixture of funding, I think, would be really important in future. I think we need to be conscious of environment and social impact. Like, for instance, there's a trend now for funds to purchase land and to sort of plant trees or whatever, but our model is to keep farmers on the land and reward them and their expertise for delivering. So think about the social and the environmental, I think. Adding value to produce and offering new services at farm level so that farmers can make an income. Offer farmer longer term contracts. 5-year contracts are a problem because the break in the contract is where the damage happens and where you lose momentum. We need much better integration as well in terms of farmers are getting paid for so many different schemes now, they don't know which way is up anymore, and that needs to change. Advice and research. If we want to farm for nature and for the environment, we need to localize as much as possible, have embedded staff in the communities to help farmers on this journey. Continuity, so have people in place over time because farmers trust individuals rather than projects or people coming from out width of the area. Look at the co-benefits. So keep this simple. There's trade-offs between food, biodiversity, carbon, all these things, but we need to keep it simple and to optimize the management to deliver as many co-benefits as we can. Data has a huge role to play in managing these programs into the future while allowing diversity at farm level. So we have national approaches, maybe, but localized to the field level, enabled by technology. We have to have good science and ongoing research, and we have to be able to evolve. We have to be progressive. Too many people think farming for the environment is about going backwards, whereas it should be going forwards, like using scoring apps, solar technology, wind technology, virtual fencing. These are all cutting edge technologies that can be employed here. We need admin systems and IT systems that will meet the needs of these projects, not the other way around, which is usually the case. And finally, we need to build better engagement. We need to be more positive and inclusive of farmers and have a more farmer-friendly approach in terms of reducing paperwork and optimizing freedom to farm. We need to involve farmers in the co-creation of solutions and tapping into their knowledge. These schemes should be voluntary, absolutely. Nobody should be forced into them. I completely believe that. And flexible. So if you want out, well, then why not? Better have you out than in if you're not delivering. Minimal hassle. So farmers hate this hassle. They want to farm. So getting rid of the paperwork, taking care of the permissions is really important. Listening, compromising, being practical and fair. These are fundamental principles of working with farmers, and being respectful and having constructive relationships. So those are just a bunch of lessons that we've learned, not from reading them in a book, but from actually living them for the last 12 or 13 years. So to me, the real question is not can we or how can we reverse the biodiversity crisis, for instance, is do we want to or not? And if we do, the solutions are there. So that's it. I want to finish with a thank you. And given that it's the end of the project, a kind of a sincere thank you, and particularly the farm families of the Burren, who have been extraordinary. We've gotten to know so many of them. And when we talk about the Burren, you talk about biodiversity and archaeology and geology, but my God, the people and the community here is just second to none. And there's so many people we've lost, and it's like losing a monument when you lose the likes of Paddy Healy or Philomena Hines, because they gave so much to the area. And we missed them all. And also thanks to the teams in Karen and in Kinvara, who've done so much way above and beyond, working evenings, weekends, and continuing to do so in the name of this wonderful landscape. And to all yourselves as well, who have contributed in various ways, I'm sure, even by joining the talk tonight or watching this. So thank you very much, and I'll stop sharing. I might give one plug, Brendan, before we finish. If you live in County Mayo and would like to avail of funding for the Hare's Corner, if you know somebody who would, so that's putting a pond or an orchard or a lovely burn pine woodland in, just apply now. Go on to the Hare's Corner website. Another little project we're involved with, Farm for Nature. There's walks on right through the summer, including this evening, And if you want to join them, they're amazing. Just finding inspiration and knowledge. So farmingfornature.ie if you want to book walks there. So thank you. Just thought I'd share that.
Thank you very much, Brendan. I don't think I could say a word to appropriately respond to your presentation. There's a huge legacy left behind by what seems like a short enough period, 2010 to 2023, but a huge legacy left behind in terms of, like you said, environmental and social gains made in this special landscape that we love so much. So thank you for distilling all that into this very short hour. You did a great job of just making everything concise and bite-sized, and I hope all the right people are going to watch it if they're not watching it already, and take lessons from this, and mostly thank you for all the work that you have done, and the team. Like you said, it's been teamwork, and it's been an absolute privilege and so inspiring to be associated with the Burren Programme through the Burrenbeo Trust. So it's been a privilege. So thank you very much for that. We don't have that much time for questions, but if anyone has any questions, please put them into the chat section or the Q&A button there, and we do our best to address them. There's one question already come in. If you were Minister for Agriculture in the morning, Brendan, what 1 or 2 changes would you make? That's a good question.
Well, that's a tricky one. First change I'd make is I'd appoint a new Minister for Agriculture. Straight away. No, look, we have plenty of rows at the department, but I do have respect for them. Their job isn't easy, but I do think we need to get serious, not just the Department of Ag, but other departments as well. Like we're in a time of crisis, so the scientists tell us, and I believe them, and we need to do something about it. So we need to get stuck in. The models are there. So I think with acres, there's a terrific opportunity. So if I was the Minister for Agriculture, I would try and modify and adapt acres, bring in more funding and adapt the systems towards regressive payments, and try to attract in some private sector funding. And to make this happen, we need it to happen now. I talked about the next cap, but that's 7 years away, and I don't think we've got that much time. So I think, well, for the Burren, hopefully, if I was Minister for Agriculture, I'd certainly be looking after the backyard of the Burren, but I'd like to think that the Burren is just one place and the environment is beyond that, and we need action in those places as well. So I think I'd, as a minister, try to reimagine farming in a way that, you know, it's about food production, but it's about all these wonderful things like biodiversity production, water management, farm management, carbon sequestration, all those things. So try to build a new vision for farming in a way that's completely inclusive and supportive and positive for farmers.
Thanks very much, Brendan. There's another question. Is there any one farm improvement that stands out over your time?
Yeah, I think in terms of actions, I think some of the work on water has been phenomenal, because it's addressed a huge issue of water point source pollution. It's created a new habitat by creating new water sources, and it's allowed the management to return to places which hadn't been managed in years. So they tend to be very good investments. These are for individual investments. I think in terms of the broader improvements, I think I've seen farms transformed from being in a state of absolute neglect and decay by just farmers getting smart. One farmer bringing in a load of horses to remove all the rank vegetation and then put his cattle back in and bring the place back from the brink effectively. So there's so many innovations and so many different ideas happening at field level, at farm level, and at project level, that it'd be hard to isolate one or two, but I do think there's been some really, really good work done thus far, particularly on water, on the gates and on the grazing systems as well.
Thanks very much. There's a comment there from Noel Kerrin. Brendan, we are thrilled to be able to follow your Burren teaching from Millbrook, Ontario, Canada. So audience from all parts of the world are watching this. So thanks to all our attendees for tuning in. Brendan, the question I had was, I know you came here as a PhD student, and the Burren Programme, as we know now, has resulted from many years of your talking to the farmers at the beginning and just learning from them. Is there, you know, because you came from the outside, I'm just interested in knowing, for someone else living in other parts of the country and looking to start something innovative like this in their own area, what would be your tip? Where would you start? Or was there any eye-opening moment for you while you were researching your PhD in the Burren?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Brangelly. And I think it's a number of things. It's hard to simplify it down, but I think the real leadership has to come from within. And I think going back to Michael Davern as well, and him bringing the farmers along with him, like I could be the best scientist or researcher student in the world, and I would have got nowhere where that kind of local leadership and that openness to change and opportunity, were that not in place, I would have been going nowhere. So in terms of advice for other groups, I do think it's a combination of harnessing, the local community, so bringing people together, harnessing their knowledge, and then marrying that with the kind of good scientific input. So then you've got the best of science and tradition and local knowledge, and you've got a fairly compelling argument for the road ahead. So you've got a good roadmap for, be it funding or programs or whatever. Those are the fundamentals, getting those things kind of right. And then the second thing I'd say is that absolute determination. You have to have complete and utter determination, because the amount of obstacles to achieve something which should be supported every step of the way is phenomenal. Now, I'm not saying I had to overcome the obstacles, but again, Michael and the Burren IFA, the amount of pushing and prodding and never saying no and pushing on and being determined is just phenomenal. But it can be done, I think, with that determination and with that understanding that this is worth doing, this is worth pursuing. I think you have to be ready to take the setbacks and keep pushing on all the time. And the third thing then is kind of, learning from others. Like, we're a good bit down the line now, we have a lot of lessons to share, and we're happy to share them, as I said before, but being aware of what happens elsewhere, what works, what doesn't work, and why.
Very good. Thanks very much, Brendan. That's absolutely incredible. There's one more comment from Bryony Williams: an incredible presentation and amazing work. Thank you so much, Brendan. The benefits are phenomenal, and the ripple effect must be and will continue to be massive. So while it's regrettable and sad that the Burren Programme has ended, like you said, that there's been, the learnings are living on, and we see them. We are trying to use them through the projects like the Hare's Corner and the Heritage Keepers, with your emphasis on community stewardship. So there's been so much gains made from that, and hopefully they will live on through other projects. While it's looking like it's the end of, it's nearly 9 o'clock or past 9 o'clock. My computer is always showing a later time. I just want to do a quick plug for our upcoming event, Communities for Heritage, which is actually this Saturday, all day in Gort, in the town hall in Gort. And it's a celebration and a networking opportunity for anyone looking to do something in their own community. It's a great chance to meet others in a similar situation who are doing amazing work in small or big ways for their natural, built, or cultural heritage. So do check them out. It's burrenbeo.com/CFH. So Communities for Heritage, and the ticket is only €10 and includes fabulous lunch and dinner, field trips, chats and discussions and presentations, and it's a great opportunity. There's still some tickets left, so grab them before it's too late. So with that, I think I'm trying to stop sharing that, and just want to, sorry, Brendan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a few people couldn't make the talks tonight, so it'll be available on YouTube. I don't know when, Brangelly, a little while.
By tomorrow or day after, Brendan, we'll put it up on YouTube.
And maybe if people would like to spread it to people, share the link with those who couldn't make it tonight. So,
yeah, just go to YouTube and Google Burrenbeo Trust, and you'll come across the Burrenbeo Trust YouTube channel, and you'll see the latest webinar recordings over there. So and there's in the webinar chat, there's the web address for Communities for Heritage for those who want to have a look. So thanks very much, Brendan, and have a very good evening, everyone.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. Bye.